Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the Minister for bringing forward this bill in regards to agency stores for Cannabis NB, private retail model. You know, we have contended since the legalization of cannabis that government should not be in the business of being in business. Whether it's NB Liquor or Cannabis NB, government has its own issues, and you can see it every day in every department, whether it's infrastructure, healthcare, education. These are the things government should be focusing on and allocating their resources and their departments to, and not having themselves concerned with beer and weed, quite frankly. But this, what we see today, is a step, somewhat of a step in the right direction, and we saw that with NB Liquor. When NB Liquor was first created, you know, you took this government monopoly with the sales of alcohol, and eventually it came to the realization that this doesn't make a whole lot of sense other than simple revenue, but I would counter that revenue would be further and greater if we're in the retail model as opposed to some of the costs associated with government-controlled monopolies. But NB Liquor went from NB Liquor stores. It then went to agency stores in some of the rural areas over the years. And now, you know, because we have put so much pressure on both sides for so many years, we're seeing, you know, things like beer and wine being sold in grocery stores, which is another step towards privatization. I've always said, just rip the Band-Aid off. Let's get this over with and move on and have these things privatized. Just to give you an example, when we talk about Cannabis NB, in its inception, to get all these fancy stores built, which nobody in the market really could care less in terms of what the stores look like or all the bells and whistles, the average cost per month on the rental buildings of Cannabis NBs, based on the leases that we have found in the initial setup, was $14,000 a month. So every Cannabis NB store that the public walks into, remember that the cost of a lease of that building that you are walking into is $14,000 a month, average about $168,000 annually. So I hope that when we talk about the agency stores, and again, I commend the government for going in this direction, but when we talk about the agency stores and the opening of the door to the private retail model, I sincerely hope that the initial setup is not in the same category as the initial setup we've seen with Cannabis NB with these atrocious leases. And then in the first couple of years, we wondered why there was no profit. Well, of course there's profit now. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Alcohol sales have gone up as well. It's not necessarily a good thing, but it's a reality. You can look at places like Ontario and Alberta, which have taken their sales to more of a private model, more open model. And again, we're not talking about a free-for-all. Nobody's saying it shouldn't be regulated. Nobody's saying it shouldn't be licensed. It should just be a Wild West. Obviously, you need reasonable regulations. You need licensing that's available. And you need reasonable taxation. And I'm convinced that if the government went down the road of full privatization of cannabis and NB Liquor, that we would actually see more revenue coming into the province through taxation and sales, and there wouldn't have the overhead with a lot of the structure that we have in these agencies that we see today. And I don't know if anybody is aware here, but newsflash, cannabis is being sold outside of Cannabis NB stores right now as we speak. And the whole idea of legalizing cannabis was to get it out of the black market, to mitigate black market sales. I'm not so sure to what extent that's happened. I mean, you can drive on any First Nations reserves in this province, and there are multiple cannabis stores on First Nations reserves. And I want to be clear, I support their right to do it. I just think the rest of society should have that same opportunity under a regulated, licensed model with fair taxation. So while this is a step in the right direction, and based on what I see, of course, the devil's always in the details, but what I've talked to the minister on this, it does seem to be a move in that right direction towards privatization. But I'm still of the opinion that government has got to get back to what government should be doing. Looking after our hospitals, getting our roads paved, bushes cut, infrastructure, bridges built and restored, education, making sure we have good schools, lots of opportunity for people in this province through private sector growth. All of the things that government is involved with, the last thing government should be involved with is selling alcohol or cannabis. It makes no sense.